Great. Well, welcome everyone to the Spinal Research Institute's In Conversation series. My name is Emma Peleg and I'm the International Spinal Cord Research Collaborations Manager. Today I have two very interesting guests joining me, Brooke Wadsworth and Tim McCallum. Brooke is an advanced physiotherapist in the Queensland Spinal Cord Injury Service at the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Queensland, Australia. And she studied a Masters of Philosophy in Clinical Research, examining the influence of abdominal binders on breathing, voice and cardiovascular outcomes. And Tim is a classically trained tenor, performing on some of Australia's most well-known stages, including The Voice and most recently at the Australian Grand Final, which is the AFL, Australian Rules Football. Now, Tim's lived with spinal cord injury since he was 18 years of age, and his desire to improve the poor respiratory prognosis statistics for people that were living with spinal cord injury really drew him to collaborate with Brooke in a debut Queensland study. So today we're chatting about spinal cord research and consumer engagement throughout the research process. And this is something that both of you have great experience in, having worked on this project together. So welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Emma.
Pleasure. So Brooke, perhaps I'll start the conversation with you. We came to know one another through your membership on the collaboration platform, the Spinal Cord Research Hub, or SCORE. Could you tell us a bit about your research broadly and perhaps what you're hoping to achieve, particularly through the research group that you formed on the SCORE platform?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Thanks for having us. I guess I'm a clinician full-time. So I do spend a lot of time in the gym in primary rehabilitation, but I also have an area of interest in research and particularly breathing dysfunction for someone that's had a spinal cord injury. So the research has started with me doing the work with abdominal binders and then moved on to looking at breathing tube removal and the dysfunction of breathing around that. And so when I initially set up that platform or try to set up the group with an interest for physios and or other staff with an interest in breathing dysfunction, it was about just trying to reach out and connect to people outside the existing group of people that I already know. It's a small field, so we do tend to know each other, but sometimes it's harder to reach into other hospitals or other universities where people have that particular interest. So I think the SCORE platform is a good way of allowing people to register their interest in that area and connect up. I must say I probably haven't utilised it to its full functional ability, and there's some stuff for me to learn there and some more promotion to get more people involved that have that area of interest in respiratory dysfunction.
Okay, great. That's really good. And I mean, I guess you're hoping with that group to dig in more into some of the respiratory work that you've been doing already, or is it new work?
So some of the existing work, but some new work, but I guess it's also when you've done a small study in your centre and then you're looking to take it further and need more numbers, need more expertise, need more brains. That's the way I see it working and bringing people together. Because I guess there's other platforms you can use, like the Facebook groups, the Yahoo groups that are about to close down as far as I'm aware. But this platform is probably a great platform for you to drive your body of research, but also just offer expertise as well, or your experiences, learned experiences, what you did well, what you didn't do so well, what you do differently. Yeah. So future research is probably where the most opportunities are on the platform. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So obviously research collaboration is, something that we feel very strongly about at the SRI, along with SCORE, which is the hub for SCI researchers and clinicians. We also have a consumer engagement program, and that aims to actively involve people with lived experience of spinal cord injury in the research process. So imagine working with Tim through the inception of this study included co-creation and the rollout part of the study. What do you see as the successes and challenges, Brooke, of these types of important partnerships where the researcher and the consumer work side by side?
Oh, look, my experience with Tim has been brilliant. We met several years ago when he moved to Queensland, moved to Brisbane, and had an area of interest in respiratory dysfunction and optimising breathing ability for people with spinal cord injuries. And it started very organically in the sense that Tim had come in, he'd had a good chat with one of our peer support workers at the time. We sort of got together, I think, over a chat and a coffee and discussed thoughts and ideas and interests. And from there, we started some informal group singing as part of just normal rehab. So we've got a 40-bed rehab unit in Brisbane, and we just had Tim coming in and singing, and a bunch of us, staff and other patients, getting together to sing. And then I guess from that excitement, Tim wanted to really test out and see if we could have any impact on respiratory function. So we needed to just pilot a project really of more intense involvement with singing and a more structured involvement with the singing program led by Tim. So he drove a lot of those ideas, and I just tried to help shape it into how it would work in the rehab setting, because it was a mix of people with existing injuries who were residing at home, and for those people that were undergoing rehab. I think the biggest thing I've learnt from it, and probably the thing I spent a lot of time with in the beginning, was going through the ethics process and the governance process. So Metro South Health here, the ethics process, they never ever had anyone with the injury or the condition that we were actually researching about as part of the core research group, like a named investigator. Mm-hmm. So we often say that we will seek counsel, we will chat to people with lived experience, we will have their input at all stages and so forth. But this was quite different. This was Tim and Cole, our peer support worker, as named investigators. So there was a lot of education and information that we had to get across to the ethics board to make sure they understood what we were doing to protect our participants, but also to protect our co-investigators, with people with that lived experience. So that was things from access to medical records, confidential information, what roles they actually had, what things we would put in place if, God forbid, either of them became one of our patients and had to be admitted. So we had to write some statements to cover those things from governance point of view here at the hospital. So it was a good learning experience. It was frustrating. I know it was frustrating for Tim too, because we had to go through these hoops. But it's changed processes here.
Right. So it doesn't sound like it was easy, but it does sound like you sort of broke new ground with having to go down this path, and
yes,
maybe that has set the path for others to follow behind.
Yes, there's certainly some statements that we've written that have been utilised by other researchers that are doing similar things going forward here.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Tim, on to you. I've mentioned about your esteemed singing and performing across the country. A lot of people may not realise how physically demanding that can be, particularly on someone who's living with spinal cord injury. But despite that, this is your passion and you've exceeded phenomenally with it. Brooke's given a bit of background as to how you got connected and how it's organically evolved that you've got into this study. But what drew you? What was your approach and your feelings as to how this came together?
I love this story because it probably came from the most unexpected place, to be honest. Firstly, I do have to say that I really have to give credit to Jeanette Tamplin down in Victoria through the Austin Hospital rehabilitation there, because many years ago I worked with Jeanette on her thesis originally around, respiratory improvements in people with spinal cord injuries, and worked on her project to incorporate that rehabilitation systems. And I really enjoyed that process. And at the time, though, I was probably Jeanette's guinea pig, really. And I followed along her footsteps and did what she said and told me to sing here and there, and hoped that it would work out for her. And I moved across to Canada for 2 years, from 2010 to 2012. And towards the end of 2012, I was doing some physio in the gym at the Toronto Spinal Unit and Rehabilitation Unit there. And I was in the gym, with lifting some weights and things, and you're expecting to see posters up on the wall of, Nike, just do it, or, I always tell the joke of, forget leg day, work on your arms, or something like that, but I saw this poster on the wall, and this was in the gym of the Spinal Injuries Unit. It was the top 5 killers in spinal cord injuries. It was basically your mortality rate right there in front of you. And not only was that mortifying, but to see it number 1 was respiratory related illnesses shocked me, because I did not think that would be the highest ranked mortality leader with people with spinal cord injuries. And I thought about that for a little bit, and I was like, but I'm so healthy. I haven't had a cold. I haven't had a flu. I learned how to cough and blow my nose. And why is this so high up? And so it got me thinking that maybe it's got to do with the fact that I'm a singer, and that I've been singing for so many years since my injury, that I've been able to keep up my breathing and respiratory abilities, and learn to use what I've got in new and exciting ways, that maybe that's what's kept me healthy and safe. And what would happen if I taught people how to sing with spinal cord injuries, and that improved their respiratory abilities, and in turn brought the mortality rate of people with respiratory illnesses down off that top of that list? I mean, that's the big end goal for me. That's the big picture, is how can we get that off the list? And I want to do it through music. So when I came back to Australia, as Brooke said, I met up with a peer support officer in the PA spinal unit. And we talked about that and said, we should get a singing group going in here and stuff. And I said, but look, mate, I can't do this on my own. Like, I'm a singing teacher. I'm not a spinal expert or a respiratory expert. How about we surround ourselves with a team of clinicians and specialists that could help us do this? And so for the first 18 months, we just had informal singing sessions in the rehab unit. But we surrounded ourselves with people like Brooke, who has been the most incredible supporter of this concept, this project, this aim to change the world for people with spinal cord injuries. We've got a great team of OTs and social workers and leisure therapists, respiratory guys. So once people got wind of what I suppose we were trying to do, it was kind of like people kind of really flocked to us, didn't they, Brooke? Like we just formed this great team, and all of a sudden we were having mass, sort of gatherings in the dining room with kind of, it was like, I'm not going to say karaoke, because it was so much better than karaoke. We were all sitting in the dining room, patients and staff, and we were singing away and loving music and enjoying it. And I was just sitting there watching it, knowing that just with each breath and with each note, that it's got to be doing something healthy for those patients. And the feedback we got was amazing. And we thought, right, we've got to research this. We've got to find how we can do this better and how we can get some better results and make it more official as a clinical therapy for people while they're in rehab.
And the byproduct is that people feel great when they're singing. Like, whether it's good for you or it's not, you feel so good. So I've
not met anyone who doesn't like music.
Yeah.
So, I just think it's a great way to be able to have an impact in this type of therapy. I now I understand all of the MIPS and MEPS, and Brooke can talk through all the measurements and all of the things that are clinically needed. But for me, it's about the me's, ma's, and the sustained notes, the how long you can all the way through, and not only is it just about singing for me, but it's about improving the quality of life, because most things from a respiratory point of view that we deal with are things like not being able to talk loud enough in crowded places, restaurants, out in the community, not being able to cough and expel the sputum that we need to, or even blow our nose and things. That's why we get these infections and illnesses. So it's practical everyday things that we were teaching them through singing. So, we sing a few songs and then we blow a few noses.
All extremely important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, that's a good insight. And it sounds like, Brooke, you've already mentioned about getting through ethics, and some of the starting paperwork requirements were challenging. What else was required to set the study up? And can you tell us a little bit about the results?
Yeah. So we are just writing up and doing some final analysis with the results. But as Tim said, we did base, and we reached out. Jeanette Tamplin is a co-investigator with us. And so we reached out to her to look at how she had done it in the past with sort of group music therapy, singing therapy. And we decided, because we'd been doing it quite organically for quite a while, and we'd have ex-patients drop in and join in and so forth, we decided we really wanted to do a structured group of 5 inpatients, people undergoing rehabilitation, and the same amount as people that were living in the community. And we were overwhelmed with people, certainly in the community, that wanted to come in to do it. But we had to keep the numbers manageable, as well as not too small, not too big.
Yeah.
So we actually had the 5 that participated from the community were probably the best 5 we could ever choose, Tim, if we were going to choose again. They were very passionate and keen, and were very helpful as far as peer mentoring and peer support for those people undergoing rehabilitation that joined in. So we did 12 weeks, twice a week, peer-led group singing. And we did have a structured to-do list and timetable of what each session would cover. We did discuss anatomy of the respiratory system. We did have lung models. We did speak about the mechanics of breathing. So we wanted to make sure that people understood the mechanics of breathing and the impairments they had. We shared stories about the impairments that they had. And we then did a series of education sessions over those 12 weeks, along with singing. And with some Jeanette's help, and obviously led by Tim, we had a selection of more challenging music and songs to sing as we progressed through that program. And we also then had some very impromptu sing-alongs where people could choose whatever we sung and discuss what we wanted to sing for the day. So there was particular songs that we sung all the way through. Paul Kelly's a popular one. So we did that for the 12 weeks, twice a week. We did pre-intervention. So before that 12 weeks started, we did a whole series of respiratory outcome measures, which were some spirometry and then some respiratory muscle strength. We did things like sustained phonation, how long you could hold your note, which gave you some indication of breath support for speech. We looked at voice loudness. We looked at range as well. So we did look at some of those breath support for voice, but also voice quality, qualitative assessments. And then we've repeated all of that at the end. And now we're just looking at all that data. What we probably would say on the results is that it was more challenging to include the 5 that were current inpatients at the time, as far as locking in attendance, because we had it at a set time twice a week. There's a lot happening in someone's rehab journey with other things going on. So I think we would still do it again that way, but what we've found now that we've finished is we've been having a lot more back to the organic impromptu sing-alongs again, and Tim and I are coming up with some plans, which he'll talk about a bit more in a minute, about what we'll do next year to try and still incorporate some of the stuff that people found really useful, which was the anatomy, the education on breathing, the whole session on coughs, blowing your nose, all of that sort of stuff, getting a louder voice, not just singing. So, you know, all you have to do is watch Tim for a short while to realise how he gets that such loud voice and such beautiful notes just by changing his posture slightly and adapting things a little differently in his chair. So we want to still incorporate all of that as well.
Fantastic. So that, it sounds like you do have a plan out of that to try and make something of it for the future. Tim, did you want to elaborate a bit on that?
No, I think Brooke really encapsulated that really well. It certainly, that's the great thing about research is that, you know, I don't know the stats on how many people succeed, you know, in their first crack, but I had high expectations just because I'm that kind of optimistic kind of guy. And whilst some of the results probably weren't as high and as life-changing as what I thought they would be, that was purely because they were my expectations and not necessarily the patients, the participants, because the feedback from the participants in terms of their enjoyment of it, what they felt like they came away from it. You know, some of the participants have gone on to participate in now community choirs and continued on singing after the pilot project, which they're the things that you kind of go, oh, right, we weren't measuring that, but that's a huge tick, you know, and now we've got other people who are saying, right, so when you start back up, we want to come back in. So I feel like there was results that we received that won't necessarily be on a research paper, but they'll be a big driver as to why we keep going and why we implement, you know, some different ways of being able to do it, because there's a need for it and people want it. And yeah.
Well, that's the best you can hope for when you go through a study of any sort, that there's something that comes out of it that shows there's a need for further work in it. And obviously you've, you know, both got some ideas on how you can maybe make that happen. Has the experience of being involved in research, Tim, has that inspired you to look at other aspects of it, or just leaving it with the singing at the moment?
No, hugely. It certainly shone a light on my inquisitive and I just want to know more about how my body works. I thought I knew. Because I'd been able to create this new singing technique and ability to be able to hit the notes and hold the notes and things like that. But whilst I practically taught myself how to do that, I don't understand it fully anatomically. So I've been in Brooke's ear about, you know, which direction to go down to maybe further my study and my knowledge about all of that, so that as I continue to do these programs, whether it's in the spinal unit here at the PA, or, you know, our future lies in a few things like Jeanette's currently working on virtual reality, group singing. We would love to incorporate that. I'd love to be able to travel around to different spinal units and do workshops and all different types of things. So for me, it's just like flared the flame a bit more, and I'm really eager to get going.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, well, that's an exciting thought to see so much more come out of it. So yeah, great work, and thank you so much to both of you for elaborating on how it came together, what you got out of it, and what's for the future. But more than anything, it's just so great to hear about this partnership where the researcher and consumer can work so closely together and you know, come up with these great results. So Thank you so much.
Can I just say a little thing just before we wrap up? Obviously, I just want to say a huge thanks to Brooke and for the whole team that have supported me through this. I really want to thank the Hopkins Centre too here for allowing us to be able to conduct the research project and continue on in the future, but also other partners that we've had involved. Spinal Life Australia, who have taken me on as a peer support officer in the ward, has now allowed me to do singing chords on the ward permanently now, which is a great collaboration and relationship. And Habitat, who are working with our assistive technology for me to be able to conduct these types of singing sessions independently and things. So we've got some great people that I just kind of felt like I needed to throw out and thank, and anyone else who wants to come on board and support us in our journey, because I really do think we are changing the quality of people's lives, and we're doing that through music. So if you got any suggestions of songs, send them through our way and we'll practice them with the group.
So people can find out more through the Hopkins Centre. Yeah, Hopkins Centre website. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, did you want to add something, Brooke? Or?
No, I just fully acknowledge what Tim has said as well. So just having the time and the ability to do this has been fantastic. And the Hopkins Centre's got all the information about our project and what we're doing going forward.
Okay, and that's the Hopkins Centre in Australia, in Queensland, Australia.
Yes.
Yep, wonderful. Well, I'm excited to see what else comes out of this. So thanks so much for your time. Just before we finish up, Tim, you can find out a bit more about Tim's personal activities, which through timmccallum.com.au. And I believe you've got a new CD out. So if anyone's looking for to hear some incredible voice over, yes.
Yeah, you can stop rotating your Buble and Bing and maybe throw on a little bit of Tim. You get it at all good and bad music stores. So online, JB or Sanity. So it's called Let Your Heart Be Light. And it's got great Christmas carols and a couple of other songs that are great for this time of year, because this year's been a tough one for everyone. And so these songs give a real message of hope, love and peace. So Merry Christmas, everyone. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for all your support.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, both of you. Thanks a lot.
Bye.